When we talk about cybersecurity, especially in healthcare, the stakes are just incredibly high. We're seeing this major shift, right? Moving away from just constantly putting out fires and towards a new goal, taking back control. So let's just jump right in and see what the data tells us is really going on.
All right, let's kick things off with a number that's, well, it's impossible to ignore. $10.22 million. That is the new record high for the average cost of a single healthcare data breach in the US. And you've got to understand, this isn't just a random number. There's this thing you could call a US surcharge, because while costs are high everywhere, the aggressive regulatory and legal scene in America just pushes this figure into a whole different stratosphere.
Okay, so if that last number didn't make you sit up and pay attention, this one will. 275 million. That's how many healthcare records were compromised in the US in 2024 alone. To put that in perspective, that's like taking the records of over 80% of the entire American population. It's staggering. And look, this wasn't thousands of tiny incidents. Nope, this was driven by just a handful of absolutely catastrophic mega breaches, which tells you there's a huge concentrated systemic risk hiding in plain sight. And that really brings us to the main point. We are so far past the idea that a data breach is just some IT problem. It's not. It is what it truly is, a systemic risk. I mean, we're talking about ransomware attacks that literally shut down hospitals, that delay life-or-death treatments, and threaten the financial stability of our entire healthcare system.
So that leads to the big question, doesn't it? How are these massive, system-wide failures actually happening? You know, if we want to build a defense, we've got to diagnose the attack first.
And here's the thing that's, well, it's kind of brutal. The attacks that do the most damage, they're not using some fancy, super sophisticated Mission Impossible style exploit. Not at all. They're getting in by exploiting the most basic preventable security gaps. It's like the bad guys are just walking right through unlocked doors.
You want a perfect example? Look no further than the Change Healthcare attack. We're talking the largest breach in US history, and its path was devastatingly simple. Attackers used stolen credentials to log into a remote access portal. And why did it work so easily? Because that portal, that critical front door, had no multi-factor authentication, no MFA. Just think about that. One single fundamental failure led to a nationwide crisis.
This focus on the easy way in, it shows us where the new front line of this battle really is. Attackers have figured out it's way easier to hit a smaller, less secure vendor to get trusted access to their real target, the big hospital or the major health plan. So your security, it's not defined by your own four walls anymore. And if you look at the data, it totally backs this up. The number of breaches that came from a third-party vendor, it doubled in a single year. It jumped from 15 to 30% of all incidents. That's not an accident. That's a strategic shift. They are going after the weakest link in the chain. But here's the problem, the big disconnect. The threat from the supply chain is exploding. But as this quote from KPMG puts it perfectly, leadership just doesn't grasp how huge and critical managing that risk is. It's a massive, massive blind spot. Okay, so enough about the problem. How do we fix it? How do we get out of this crisis mode and start taking back control? Well, you need a plan, a real playbook. And that's exactly what the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 is. What this framework really does, at its heart, is it gives everyone a common language to speak and a map to follow. So instead of just scrambling and reacting to everything, you get a structured, proactive way to think about and talk about cybersecurity across your entire organization. So how does it work? Well, it's built around 6 key functions. It all starts at the top, with govern. That's about setting the strategy. Then you identify your assets and risks, you protect them with safeguards, you detect potential incidents, and then you have plans to respond and recover when they happen. It's the whole package, from big picture strategy all the way down to getting back on your feet after an attack. All right, so having a framework is great, but we all know putting it into practice is a whole different ballgame. So let's turn this framework into an actual playbook you can use.
First things first, you have to realize the rules of the game are changing, fast. Regulators are done playing around, they're closing the loopholes. Under old HIPAA rules, some controls were addressable, which basically meant a company could say, yeah, we know the risk and we accept it. Not anymore. With the new rules, things like MFA and encryption are becoming mandatory. They're non-negotiable.
So that makes you think, right? For anyone listening, you have to ask yourself, where is my biggest blind spot? Right now.
And chances are, it's exactly where you aren't looking. Just look at this. Nearly 40% of companies in healthcare and pharma
have already been hit by a disruption that started with one of their third-party vendors. That supply chain? That's the blind spot for so many.
Okay, so let's put that playbook together, right here, right now. Number 1, enforce the non-negotiables. That means MFA everywhere, no exceptions. Number 2, get really good at vulnerability management. You can't protect something if you don't even know it's vulnerable. Third, build an incident response plan that can actually take a punch. And test it. And please have offline backups. And finally, lock down that supply chain. Vet every single vendor and make sure security requirements are baked right into your contracts.
But at the end of the day, all these technical fixes, they all rely on one thing. And it's the most important piece of the puzzle: leadership and culture. This is the big mindset shift that has to happen. Cybersecurity is not an IT problem to be solved. It's an enterprise risk to be managed. That means accountability has to move from the server room straight to the boardroom. It needs to be taken just as seriously as financial risk, period. And look, the connection here is crystal clear. Cybersecurity isn't just about keeping hackers out. It's the foundation for managing huge business issues like patient privacy. Think about it. A security breach isn't just a data leak. It's a breach of patient trust. And that is a core business problem. And this is the direction the entire industry has to move in. The health sector's own strategic plan for 2029 calls for a future where the C-suite owns this risk, where secure design is everybody's job, not just IT's, and where good security is seen as something that helps the business grow, not something that holds it back.
Which really leaves us with one final big question to think about. In the world we live in now, is your organization's approach to all this just a box-checking exercise, a compliance hurdle to get over, or is it the very thing that builds trust, builds resilience, and actually acts as a catalyst for real, sustainable growth?